Hey everybody, and welcome to the Boogie House Facebook page. I am your host, Tyler, otherwise known as T. Blake Brady, and I've decided to kind of expand the Facebook page, and if you're watching this on YouTube, the YouTube channel, to include some more personal videos instead of it just being dog posts or cat posts and author quotes and things, so that you can see what my writing process is, and maybe I can answer some questions about the books themselves and give you an idea of where these ideas come from. And more specifically, with this video, I'm going to be talking about where I got the idea for my newest novel, Suicide Blondes. Now, it's the first book in the not in the Rolson McKane universe, and so it's kind of a creatively a new thing for me, and so it was difficult to come together. And unlike what most people think that I talk to, they always ask, the first question is, how do you come up with a book? Where do you get your ideas? And if you're a writer yourself, you've heard this before. I'm not breaking any new ground with this topic, but I can talk about where my ideas come from. And it's not as though the story drops unfiltered into my lap and I just type up the words and publish the book. So Suicide Blondes itself comes from kind of an amalgamation of a couple of ideas that I want to talk about. First, there's the Nashville connection. I knew not long after I started dating my now wife that I wanted to write something about Nashville. It's just a city that kind of demands to be written about. It's got such a rich history, and the music scene obviously is unparalleled. And there's just a lot of culture to this place. And so I knew I wanted to set something in Nashville. And it was a city that I was learning about myself. I was driving from Athens, Georgia to Nashville once a month or so for the span of 2 years. And so I was kind of learning about a whole new place. And so that need for knowledge is part of why I write. So I knew at some point I was going to write a book set in Nashville. And that part has been set for a while, but I didn't have an idea. I didn't have the meat of the story. I couldn't just write a book about people walking around Broadway or, hanging out in the Gulch. So I had to come up with something that matched up with that would work. And so I needed a mystery, a murder, something to do with suspense, or what's going to drive the conflict. How are we going to get rising action and get to the climax of the story? I needed something that would weave characters through Nashville, so it'd be a really interesting story. And that is the second thing I wanted to talk about. It's the other part of this book, which is the Suicide Blondes aspect. And that breaks down even into two little parts. One, I became mightily obsessed with the story of Michelle Carter. So if you don't know about her, it's a really tragic story about a young woman who texted with her boyfriend and ended up convincing him to commit suicide via text. It was sort of a really severe version of what we'd call cyberbullying. And it was just such a bizarre and heartbreaking, tragic story that I just could not, A, I couldn't wrap my mind around it, and B, I couldn't stop reading about it. I read a long People Weekly spread about it. I read all kinds of articles on the internet about it, and there are certain stories that stick with you, and it kind of sat down and I started to digest it in a way that I don't most true crime stories. I'm an avid true crime person, but this story stuck with me in a new and just really weird way, and I couldn't get past it, and I knew that I was going to write something about it. I just didn't know what it would be, whether it would be an episode for the Principled Uncertainty podcast, or if it would be a blog entry or what, but it just stuck with me. And eventually, it connected to a part of my own upbringing that I thought would make for an interesting story, because the 90s was a really weird and hectic time for the internet. And though we didn't have a term for cyberbullying, everybody did it. I used to go to chat rooms and I would talk to people. And I remember we used to joke around on the internet a lot. Me and my friends in high school, we go to chat rooms and pick on each other. And just that seed of an idea is what's sort of sprang into Suicide Blondes. I got an idea of these girls who go to a really elite private school in Nashville, and they bully this person into committing suicide, which is in and of itself really tragic. And there needs to be more awareness of things like cyberbullying. And I took that seedling of an idea and mixed it with this sprawling metropolis that I live in, Nashville. And that's kind of how the idea for Suicide Blondes came together. The first draft was much more just focused on the now with sort of allusions to the past. But if you read this current version, the final draft, the published version of Suicide Blondes, it bounces back and forth between what is now, the today Nashville, and then what the world of the 90s was like. It was, kind of the Wild West when it comes to the internet. And so the book itself was really easy to write once I had these two elements together. Once I knew that A, it would be in Nashville, and B, that I had this sort of group of people who had a little bit of privilege and very little empathy in their teenage years, which I was not an empathetic teenager. And so I felt kind of a weird, strange anger and kinship with these people that I created, because I could sympathize with their feelings of, anger about youth and all of that. And so it became a challenge to not only write about these characters, but to try to bend them towards sympathy, because they're not very sympathetic people. So I hope that gives you a little bit of insight about where I came up with Suicide Blondes and how authors come up with their ideas. This is just one of those process videos that I hope to share more of. How do I come up with stories? How do stories get made? And if you're an author, draw me a line in the comments. How do you come up with your stories? Or if you're an artist of any kind, where do you get your inspiration? I'm always interested to know how people write poetry, draw, paint, photography. All of these are different art forms that I would like to know more about. So be sure to, if you enjoyed this video, like the Boogie House Facebook page. Like this video, give it a thumbs up. Share it to your own page. Comment. And I hope you enjoy this. And we'll see you next time on the Boogie House channel. Thank you. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And see you next time on the internet.